come to it at last, the final episode of this season. This time sponsored by Disney, with a recap that cannot be skipped. Ignoring the recap, we open on the Dual Legion camps with Legate McCulkin just walking off with Caesar's body while everyone else is fighting. Left camp's Caesar has been impaled, but I guess nobody's had any time to do anything about it. Legate McCulkin drags the original body into a tent and grabs a piece of paper, deciding who will be the next leader. Psych! It says that he is the Legion! These poor fools have been fighting a war over nothing, and if they had done what I suggested before, and just have whoever dumped the body read the note, all of this could probably have been avoided, or at least lessened. Random guard asks what it says, and in a grab for power, Legate McCulkin stabs him, rather than risk anybody knowing, then eats the note. Going outside, not one Legionnaire asks if he is the new Caesar. Instead, everyone's already cheering before he is even past the tent flaps. Also, nobody questions the bloody blade in his hand, and that 2 men entered the tent and 1 man left. Anyway, he gives a small speech about claiming Vegas for their empire and building a palace. Caesar's Palace, which I think is supposed to be a joke, but it's not played off as one, which is nice. We get an external shot and we see the sheer number of legionaries at this camp, which begs the question of how they're at war with the right side camp and Little Caesar for so long. They clearly have the numbers to win by a significant margin, so why did a little dirt mound stop them for 15 years? Title screen and then back to Vegas with Ghoul Howard talking to Senor Bungalow on the big screen. Senor Bungalow says his body has become a target over the years and has been physically attacked multiple times, but Ghoul Howard does not care. He holds Cold Fusion hostage and threatens to shoot it, which Senor Bungalow guesses would damage other planets. Problem here. It is roughly 140 million miles from Earth to Mars, and as the largest known nuclear detonation was the Tsar Bomba, which was 22 miles, that would mean that the cold fusion pill would have to hold around 5 million times the force at the largest known detonation, which, given Ghoul Howard is threatening to destroy it as he has nothing left to live for, would probably obliterate the entire Earth before even reaching Mars. Ghoul Howard is an uncaring, psychotic dick. Still, Ghoul Howard asks why Senor Bungalow had not mentioned a vault for management in Vegas, which he is told is the reason because he never got the fusion pill. This is conveniently ignoring the fact that Ghoul Howard never asked the question before now, so there was no way that Senor Bungalow would have known that he wanted to know that particular information. This exchange sounds like a smart response, but when you think about it, both of them are just dumb. Deciding not to destroy the entire planet just to be a spiteful dick, Ghoul Howard and Senor Bungalow strike a deal to get him into the vault. Back outside, and the Deathclaws have not yet gotten Team to Freeside, but instead seem surprised the gate was broken. Maximus tells everyone to get inside so he can take on the Deathclaws alone. It is difficult to tell in this scene, what with everyone running around, but it looks like the Deathclaws have popped out of existence for it, and then back in again once Maximus had turned around. These very fast alpha predators, as it turns out, are not any of that, but will instead stand around while a herd of prey animals tries to run away. It is hero time now, however, as apparently getting knocked through a gate has caused the power on weapons to switch on. On his back is a rocket mortar which blows apart one Deathclaw, and not only does the left arm have a combat blade, but also a flight control jet and 2 more rocket launchers. Not even the T-60 has that power built into it. However, all these appear to be single shot, potentially double shot only, as Maximus starts getting beaten up. Oh, and another 6 Deathclaws spawn from off screen. Where were they over the past 2 episodes? They didn't exist. Enough of topside now as we go back to Lucy and the head of the Congresswoman. Lucy is steeling herself for what she knows she has to do, only for the Congresswoman to still be alive. Somehow. This is a living hell for her, so she just keeps repeating, "Kill me." Lucy does not want to, before finally giving in and smashing her with a crowbar. Scene end, and we are back with Norman being dragged off to a vault trial. Claudia tries to stop them, but is thrown against a wall, which just happens to be the lift switch, which opens the doors to the lift, but there's no car there. Unnamed Bud goes to look and says there's nothing. But oh no, movie monster trope as a roach jumps out of nowhere and kills her. This is followed by many more roaches as the rest of the Buds run, leaving Norman to cower under a chair. None of them go after him as he staggers through the building, however, instead going after everyone who is faster and further away. He reaches the room where the Buds are, somehow ahead of the roach swarm, but is denied entry. This gives the roaches the chance to fly past and push open the door, get inside and start eating everyone again, with, strangely, not a single one of them going after Norman, who decides to try and hide under a table. Back with Ghoul Howard, with Senor Bungalow expositing to him how he tried to rig the game, but that is obviously too much time away as we go back to Maximus, still fighting and losing as he seems to have used up the last of his ammo. Rather than help, the residents of Freeside start placing bets on him getting killed. Joke time as Thaddeus steps forward and places a bet on Maximus living of 500 caps. But you have him baited, as it is double joke time, as Thaddeus has 500 caps just stuffed down his trousers, and they spill out all over the floor. Now, I don't know about you, but I imagine having 500 metal bottle caps sitting between your leg and your trousers for several days of walking around and sleeping not only would make a lot of noise, but also be quite visible as a huge bulge at the bottom of the leg, and probably cause quite a lot of cuts when those metal edges start digging into the skin. None of this Thaddeus has. Back in the vault-tec facility now, and Lucy is looking quite distressed from having to beat a head in. There is a quick jump to more exposition from Senor Bungalow, and then surprise Hank! He's gotten out of the handcuffs and has teleported behind Lucy. How? Why? If he had access to the key, why was he struggling in the last episode? Don't think about it. This scene needs to happen now. He goes on about how Senor Bungalow wanted to turn people into robots, and what he was doing was the same, but with what he calls a little bit more personality, aka the thoughts of the Congresswoman. Once again, with Ghoul Howard, with more exposition about how the president from the last episode was part of the Enclave, which Howard gave the cold fusion pill to. Pause for a question. As this show has presented, the Enclave controlled pre-war vault-tec as shown through the lift conversation with Wildzig. It was vault-tec who obtained the cold fusion pill from Moldava and presumably got it working pre-war. Every implication was that this was very important to them. So why would they allow vault-tec to sell it to Senor Bungalow? They could not know that Cooper Howard would get involved, steal it, and then hand it back to them. And as Senor Bungalow himself stated in this very episode, there is only one of them in existence. And moreover, if it is working pre-war, as who would want to buy a thing that does not work and require a dedicated staff to fix, was what Wiltzig was doing with it in Season 1. The implication in that season was that he'd gotten it working before escaping with it to return to Moldava. But if the implication in this season of it being functional pre-war is to be believed, then that means that he spent years just poking and prodding it, waiting for Dog to grow up so that another scientist could see that it's an unauthorized experiment and raise the alarm. Speaking of pre-war scene now, and we learn that Hank and Stephanie have gotten engaged, and the suggestion is put forth to get her a job at Vault-tec. So now we know the answer to a question that was never raised in the first place. How did Stephanie get into Bud's Buds? Anyway, everyone splits up and Howard's walk past a pair of very convenient foreshadowing billboards before all the public phones start ringing. How very convenient that this happened right as the Howards walk past them. Back with Lucy and Hank. Hank reveals his plan was to miniaturize the mind control tech and implant it in random people so that nobody would know who is controlled and who is not. At which point, Legion Man enters the scene and Hank reveals this device to her. There is a scuffle. Lucy is starting to lose as Ghoul Howard enters the very outskirts of the Vault-tec building area. Back outside again, and Maximus is still losing, and it is joke time. Woman says that if he loses they are all dead, but then random guy keeps his bet. Maximus is exhausted as his power armor is getting broken, but the attacking Deathclaw gets shot in the eye by Thaddeus. Why all of a sudden is he up on the roof of the casino and taking action when the last scene had him joining in with the betting? Because this scene needed to happen as set up for a following scene. It is and then storytelling at its finest. Back underground, and Hank is preparing to control Lucy, but surprise Ghoul Howard! He has teleported in behind them. You see, barely a few seconds have passed since Lucy failed to fight off Legion Man, but in that time, Ghoul Howard has walked across the open floor, entered the building, walked up the stairs, just happened to stop on this exact floor, walked up behind everyone, and then shot both Legion Man and Hank. Or he teleported. But he's not here to kill Hank, oh no. He's here to kick a gun over to Lucy to let her decide what to do. And then he walks off. Back outside again, and the power armor is trashed. So Maximus gets out and arms himself with a roulette wheel and a pull cue to continue fighting the Deathclaws, who are just patiently waiting there. One charges and is shot dead, but not by Thaddeus this time. No, it is time for payoff scene. As you see, it was a ranger from the roof of the Silver Rush, mimicking the opening cutscene from New Vegas itself. I imagine there will be plenty of people pointing at the screen, exclaiming that they know what the thing is, just as there will be plenty of other people rolling their eyes at the blatant fan baiting. Once again, by the way, how did that ranger get up there? He was not in any previous scene. The doors to the Silver Rush are not open, suggesting that he has run in a hurry, and there is no external ladder for him to climb. I think that, once again, we have an instance of characters teleporting into places where the script says they need to be. Around the corner, then comes a marching company of NCR troopers, led by Rodriguez, who state they will take over from here. Now, I have seen people saying that this is the battalion mentioned as being out east by Rodriguez in episode 3, but I do not think this is the case. The scene, as shown in episode 3, suggested that the NCR that were cut off near Prim did not know what was going on in the wider world, as they did not understand how much time had passed since the destruction of Shady's Sands. We also have the information that Ghoul Howard had been to both Novak and Camp Golf, with no sign of the NCR anywhere on that side of the Colorado River. I think this is just Deus Ex NCR, and they have been spawned in just for this scene. Just up the road from that scene, and we now have Lucy and Hank emerging from the Lucky 38. She does not seem to be cautious at all, which is very funny, since the last time she was at this location there were 3 Deathclaws threatening to attack her and Ghoul Howard, causing them to run away. I guess she read the script that said all the Deathclaws have left. Furthermore, there is no sound of gunfire from off-screen to suggest that the NCR are, at this point, attacking the 2 remaining Deathclaws on the strip. Anyway, Hank has been implanted with a tiny mind control chip, but Lucy has not switched it on. This is supposed to be an emotional scene, but as the autistic git that I am, I feel nothing as Hank comes to the realisation that Lucy's plan to have him taken back for trial has changed. She wants to know what his plan really was before pushing the button, and in her own words, turn him into the father she thought he was. Hank says the wasteland was the actual experiment, and that he has sent mind-controlled people out following orders 200 years in the making. He then zaps his own mind and forgets who Lucy even is. Lucy seems lost as Maximus comes walking in from behind, meaning that the scene we just had was in fact taking place while the NCR dealt with the remaining Deathclaws in absolute silence. Anyway, another emotional scene as they walk towards each other and then embrace. Next scene of the show, as Lucy opens Hank's mystery box to reveal a Pip-Boy. But not just any Pip-Boy, it's an Enclave one. She sends out a broadcast to begin Phase 2, while the residents of 32 all chant "Death to Management" outside the office, echoing how they were all found in Season 1, but with a different implication. You see, in Season 1, the management they were after was in Vault 31, whereas this one is aimed squarely at Stephanie herself. However, with that said, we do not find out what Phase 2 is, as we just get a shot of the Enclave dog breeding facility picking up the broadcasts, and a terminal showing the request has been received, along with all other radio signals sent out this season. Penultimate scene of the show, and we are with Norman. This is another emotional scene as he enters the room where all the buds were, finding Claudia as the only survivor, very convenient, seeming to have passed out after stabbing the last Radroach. How very lucky indeed for both her and Norman. On to the final scene, which is actually 2 scenes mushed together. In the pre-war, Cooper is getting arrested by the Secret Service, and it is Senor Bungalow who is calling all the phones. In the post-war scenes, Ghoul Howard has arrived at his family's cryotubes and is prepared for another emotional scene, but is faked out as both the pods open to reveal they are empty except for a single postcard pointing him to Colorado, which is where he heads off to. And I suppose technically there is a scene of the Legion marching to Vegas, with Lucy and Maximus watching it from Senor Bungalow's penthouse, where they will presumably find Hank sitting on the ground and kill him. Post-credits jump scare, the Brotherhood of Arseholes are still fighting each other at Area 51. It has been at least 2 days by this point, if not longer, with Cynical Dane no longer being cynical, as they are now working for Quintus again, and have recovered the plans for him to build his own Liberty Prime. With what, may I ask? I doubt all the materials they need are at Area 51 to allow for this, plus it is an active combat zone. There is no way he would be able to build it without taking manpower off the front line or being seen by others. That is also not accounting for idiots in the ranks, like those who just blew up a car for shits and giggles. Anyway, that was Season 2. More happened in this episode than the last, but it was still very drawn out. Far more than it needed to be. Once again, barely anything was answered that had been set up, with most of the ending scenes of this episode being used to set up a cliffhanger for Season 3, which, in all honesty, I doubt they will pay off when it comes out. I give this episode, and this season overall, a 4 out of 10. I will be honest and state that I did not notice much that they got wrong lore-wise, other than there being, for some inexplicable reason, a vault-tec but also enclave super building underneath the Lucky 38. We know there is a weapons testing facility under there, as shown if you upgrade the Securitrons with the Platinum chip, but there's no way that Mr. House, as presented both in the game and in this show, would be oblivious to the Enclave being a player at the table if he let them build a giant office underneath his casino and link them up together. And also, speaking of Mr. House, no, his body has not been the target of multiple physical attacks over the years. As is seen in New Vegas, when you open his pod, if you leave him alone, he states he has a year of life at most thanks to germs. So no, he has not been. I'm not sure what I'll be doing next week. Perhaps trying to figure out the routes of everyone took in the show. Perhaps streaming some Fallout Tactics. Please let me know if there's anything you would like me to see. And with that, I will bid you all a good day.